age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Just let me see if you can hear me in the chat, and give me a shout out if my mic's off or anything like that. I might have to change positions here just because I'm uh, I'm getting a little bit of a weak signal. So let me know if you can hear me in the chat. And I just want to talk a little bit about CROM to begin with, and then I want to talk about making comics because that's what I'm doing right now, and that's thank you very much, Sound Engraver. And that's what I'm planning to do for the next little while. So just to let everybody know again, if you hear me cut out or anything like that, just let me know. My signal's a little weak here again today. But first off, just want to let everyone know that CROM the Destroyer is doing great. I think we hit about 11,000 last time I checked today. So we're doing pretty good. We're closing in on, I don't know how many backers we have. I think it's almost 175 now. So that's pretty good, considering the fact that this is the beginning and we still got another 40 days to go. Why don't I put up some of this CROM the Destroyer art in the background while I talk about CROM, just because it's so beautiful. Just give me 1 second. So, as I said, the link for CROM the Destroyer is in the description. This is my new campaign, if you haven't heard yet. And I want to thank everyone who's backed it so far. Again, we're almost up to 175 backers, about 11,000, which is great. The biggest seller, well, a lot of people are buying just the book, which I don't mind at all. There's a lot of posters that go along with it. We got the oversized cards, the cloth map, the extra story that I wrote, which is just a text story, all that kind of stuff. So you're looking at some of the CROM the Destroyer art in the background. But today I wanted to do something a little more fun to just go over my same campaign over and over again. I wanted to talk about making comics because last week I did talk a little bit about crowdfunding. And let me just go back to the comments here for 1 second. Miss Maria says she backed it. Thank you very much, Miss Maria. What I talked about last week was crowdfunding and a little bit of the problems before you even start to crowdfund. And I want to do more of that kind of thing, but I want to have a little bit more of a focus when I do the next video on that. So I'll probably do a couple of notes or something up on it, at the very least, a few things that might help me a little more, along with a smoother hour video talking about crowdfunding. But today, I wanted to share a couple of things that I learned over the last 2 years making comics. That's why I just want to talk about geeking out about making comics. So right off the bat, I want everybody in the comments, if you can, tell me what your favorite comic is. And I'll start there. And I'm going to talk probably for about 15, 20 minutes, and then I'll get to the chat. But if you could put in, if you want to put in the comments what your favorite comic is, see if I can remember it or pull it up in my memory. But for my money, my favorite comic book and my favorite comic run is the 1980s Walter Simonson, Louise Simonson combination for Thor. So it's the Mighty Thor. I can't remember what issue it is exactly. It was with the destroyer on the front. I said this many a times. Miss Maria, I don't think I'm going to mention Aristotle today, but who knows? It always seems to come back to him. But that would be my favorite comic and my favorite comic run. And this is the kind of time that I'm trying to imitate with my comics that I'm making. And I wish I had more time and more initiative to go out and buy a whole bunch of books about comic making, because I know there are some great comic making books out there, and just get the fundamentals from those books. But what I do is I just look at great runs of comics, comics that, because I have so many comics, especially from the 80s and the 90s, more I'd say from the 90s and the 80s, although I would appreciate the 80s comics more than the 90s one. And the thing is that I go back and read great runs of comics. I think to myself, I want to make my comic this kind of comic. I want to make it an X-Men kind of comic, a Thor kind of comic, a Captain America. And I go back to the great runs, usually from the 80s. So that's what I'm doing. I find that a lot of people in crowdfunding are doing the 90s thing. They're looking for 90s books, and they're trying to recreate the idea of the 90s. Now, for me, making comics, I would say the 90s is a pale comparison to the 80s. And that's why I go back to the 80s style of making comics. Now, what's the difference? Okay, I'll see if I can show you in the background, because I tried to upload a few things um, as a video, but it didn't work. So I'm just going to show you some backgrounds, I think. Let's see here. Um, well, we'll put it this way. I'll show you some Walter Simonson art. See if I can stop that video and show you some Walter Simonson art here for a second. I will have to, I think it will take a second. But anyways, I'll talk about it and give you some visuals in a minute. Oh, I'll have to hide this one and put the background. There's Walter Simonson in the background. Okay. So the thing is that with older comic art, let's see if I can do two things at once here. With older comic art, what you got usually was a lot of panels and a lot of dialogue. A lot of people, I don't think, are ready for the amount of dialogue and panels that you will get in comics from pre 80s and even into the 80s. There's a lot of that. But what you get with a lot of the new image stuff, image type stuff within the 90s, is a lot of splash pages and a lot of crowded pages where you get two or three panels and that's it. That's where you get your Rob Liefelds and all that kind of, I guess it would be almost a splash page every other page kind of comic. And that's great for the visuals, but it's not so great for the storytelling. And I'm concentrating on storytelling itself. And I want to be able to give you some of that 90s feel, but go back to the old idea of strict panel behavior and how panels and sequentials actually work. Now, I think the merging of those two ideas happened in the 80s, especially with Walter Simonson art. And the thing is that he gives you splash page after splash page every once in a while, but he also returns to the sequential art, very strict panel sequential layout, and that kind of thing. So that's the kind of style that I'm imitating. Again, with again 80s kind of art, but mostly Walter Simonson is the thing that I go back to, but not always. I go back to John Byrne's X-Men in the 80s. I go back to Mike Zeck's Captain America in the 80s. A lot of these, um, a lot of these 80s runs are just beautiful comics and beautiful runs of comics. So the thing is that, again, there's a combination of moving into a storytelling venue where it has more than just set panel sequentials every page, unless you're going into something like Keith Giffen with his Legion of Superheroes, but still. And so that's what I see within the difference between 70s comics, 80s comics, and 90s comics. So again, this would just be, I'm not some oracle on high telling you this is the way things are. I'm just telling you what I notice. I try to pick out patterns of things. That's why I like logic and reason and Aristotle so much. There you go, Miss Maria. I mentioned Aristotle. But when I look at these comics and the difference between 70s comics and 90s comics, again, the difference is stark in contrast to say the least, especially in how much you can get into a word balloon, how much you can put into the panels for word balloons, how much story is there in text as compared to in the visual. But the 80s is the sweet spot where it comes together for both. Now, there's a couple other smaller things that I just wanted to touch on about comic making that I have, I think, pulled codes out of or patterns out of from those great 80s runs. So I talked first about the fact that, and the reason why I think 80s comics are the best. But there are a few other things, smaller things that I pull out of these. And some of these would be, I'm not sure you can see it on this panel because I'm in the way here, but if you look at Walter Simonson sound effects, okay? And again, these are just me coming up with ideas that I think that I've found patterns within these great comics. And if anybody wants to use them, go right ahead. Because I think that we all need to share the best way to make comics or the best way we think to make comics. And this is how we get the industry or a new industry back on its feet. But my looking at Walter Simonson and his sound effects, that would be very much the pattern to develop sound effects, in my opinion. Look at Walter Simonson because, well, he was an artist that put the sound effects in with the art. Now that's something that typically did not happen prior to him working on comics. If you look at his older stuff like Metal Men, when he worked for DC, you can see it beginning there. But really, once again, the place where it took off was in his Mighty Thor run. And what he did was he used sound effects in a very particular way. And it's a way that doesn't really translate into, I don't think, DC Comics at all. As far as I'm concerned, the way that he usually does sound effects. Now, he uses straight sound effects for a lot of things, for sequentials that you might not actually get any movement in. You know, you get feet, you get, what's her name? Can't remember her, Valerie Cooper in the Fantastic Four, or I can't remember if it was the Fantastic Four or the Thor. But anyways, you get a woman walking in high heels, but all you see is a pair of feet. That's one sequential. He doesn't want to have to put in a whole bunch of sequentials for a woman walking. So he puts in the woman's feet and then click, 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 click as she's walking down a hall. This is the way that sound effects, I think, and I try to implement in my books work. It's the fact that sometimes you might want to put a sound effect in there to accentuate what is going on, but you don't want to clutter up your panels with sound effects. Therefore, my standard rule of thumb is, again, if I want to have a giant explosion or something like that to show how large it is, I do use a sound effect. But at the same time, if there's a standard panel that doesn't exactly convey what is going on in the panel with either the, without, let me see, if you take the art itself and you can't automatically see something that's going on, and the text itself, which I'm putting in, doesn't exactly explain what is going on, a sound effect is put in for the other kind of explanation that's neither, I would say, neither visual nor textual, being at the same time both visual and textual, again, which is a sound effect. There's a panel in Thomas Valiant #1 where a bunch of rocks are falling behind Farrell, almost on top of her, but it doesn't really come out so much on the page of the art. And she does make a remark about it, saying, "Hey, watch what you're doing." But at the same time, I didn't think that that panel conveyed it as well as it should, so I put a sound effect in there. And that's where these things would be very useful and helpful, besides things like massive explosions. So yeah, standard sound effects, I would say, work that way and work very well that way. And you'll have to put in something that's standard. Again, these are just my rules. But with the Walter Simonson sound effects, where he tries to put in something that gives you almost a textual that is visual at the same time. What he does is, I find, again, from my exploration into the way he makes comics, is the fact that he takes a word which is onomatopoeia and he makes that half of the sound effect, and the other half of the sound effect is the word itself. So you get crack a boom. So what crack a boom is one half of it is onomatopoeia, which is crack or his normal krakow, where you get a boom at the end. So, which is the literal description of the sound of the word. So that's how he uses sound effects in a very effective way and makes them more part of the art than part of the text itself. So again, that gives you a double way of understanding a sound effect, which carries the mind into two different places, both the onomatopoeia and the literal translation of the sound, which again, these are just my rules, but I think these are the ways that the greats make comics. And I think that's the best way to use these kinds of sound effects that Walter Simonson uses. Now, I'll give you another example of the things that I've picked out and haven't been able to implement yet. Let's look at some of these covers from, they're only partial covers because I don't know why StreamYard doesn't allow me to show the entire thing. It's just a background. Anyways, when I was going over these Jonah Hex covers for just the backgrounds for one of my videos, I noticed something extremely telling about these Jonah Hex covers. And it's something that I think I'm going to employ in the future for all covers that I want made for my comics. And the thing is about these Jonah Hex covers is that there's always 3 points, a minimum of 3 points of danger. Because as I was talking to Graham Nolan and talking about sequentials, and he's saying, no, the cover is not a sequential. I thought to myself, well, it could be characterized as a sequential since it is part of the sequence of events in some way. And I tried to do that. I try to make my covers sometimes part of the actual sequence of events. But he says, no, it's an illustration. So you got to look at it as an illustration, as a standalone illustration, as something that the audience is going to say, I'm not going to pick up this book and look at the sequentials unless that illustration actually pulls me in to do so. And so, again, looking at these Jonah Hex covers, and it's not just Jonah Hex, but I found it very telling within these old Western comics like Jonah Hex. You get 3 points of danger. One, if you're looking at the background here, you got the raging river in the background. That's your, what I would call, I don't know, atmospheric danger, because it's not direct, it's something there in the background. Secondly, you have the fact that you have, I don't know if you can see it on this panel very well, but he's going across a rope and the rope is actually breaking. That's the main point of danger that is actually going to be implied within the illustration itself. And the secondary bit of danger is the fact that he has a woman just huddled around his neck, and that can't be very comfortable nor easy on his arms to actually get across. So there's 3 points of danger. And I find with these Jonah Hex covers, there's always 3 points of danger, and it's extremely well done. These are covers that I remember so well. Again, I don't think you can see it very well. I wish I could move myself over. I don't think I can with these. But here's another Jonah Hex cover. Okay. You have a background danger in the fact that he's climbing up this cliff and he's holding on. I don't think you can see it very well here, but he's holding on to this tiny little twig, and that's the only thing supporting his entire weight. And it's looking like it's pretty, well, not well situated for his entire weight, so he might fall off. This is your background danger, and then you got 2 points with these two Indians pointing rifles at him, and these are the 2 points, or if you want to count them as one, these are the 2 points of danger. The maximum points of danger, the rifle's pointed at him, whereas you have him reaching for the knife, which is in his back, basically under his under the back of his coat, which would be your 3rd point of danger. So always, I find in these great covers, that's what you get. You get these 3 points of danger. There's also, let me see if I uploaded it. There's a couple more I uploaded. Here's a Thor one. Okay. This is much more of what I was talking about. And this is superhero. This is not Western. Again, I wish you could see the whole cover. I will probably try my best to do better to upload these things before I actually have to show them to people so that they can be seen better. But you can see enough of the cover here so that it actually, what I'm saying is actually going to make sense. The thing is that You have a mist that is crawling across the ground. That's your background danger. That's your, I don't know, background is not exactly the word for it. I would say latent danger. There's a latent danger to it. So it's not an immediate danger, but it could be. And then you have the immediate danger, which is Sif, who's been turned into a vampire. And then even if he deals with her, there's still a secondary and even bigger danger here, which is Dracula in the background. So you have 3 points of danger. Again, these are the great covers of the 80s runs and some of them earlier from the 70s. But again, this is the way I would say not the sequentials, but the illustrations for covers should be great. And again, these are things that I'm pulling out of what I see looking at great comics and great comic runs. And I'm trying to implement them in the making of my comics. Whether or not you go with something else, that's fine by me. I'm just giving you what I think is the best. So me and other people can share and hopefully pull out better and better comics every time we make them. So there's that. And so I guess I've been talking for about 20 minutes, but these are the kinds of things that I want to talk about when I talk about geeking out about comics. And I want to do more of these videos. And again, um, part of what I'm talking about with crowdfunding and then with this video about making comics is the fact that I want to share with everybody what I've learned. It's not very much at this point, but at the very least, I'm taking my storytelling credentials and doing what I can to use them as well, hopefully not a crutch, but hopefully the mainstay of what brings out the audience. And then we want to add on that a lot of art that is going to be spectacular. And again, I have spectacular artists and I don't want to step on their feet too much, but at the same time, everybody's looking to me for direction because I'm not just the writer, I'm also the producer of the comic. So if you're someone who's writing and producing and doing the art or any of those two, again, you're going to have a heavy load to pull. And the more that you can listen to other people talk about what they find works for them or what we are seeing works within older comics is great, because you got to remember that within 2009 2010 Sana Amanat was brought into Marvel Comics quite specifically, and I've done videos about this, as words from her own mouth to basically cut off the past of Marvel Comics and start anew with a new way to make comics, and it has failed spectacularly. And all of those older comic writers and producers and artists are starting to go by the wayside now. Some of them are starting to die, like John Romita Sr. Barry Windsor Smith is just in the hospital for a stroke. I don't know how he's doing. I think he's doing pretty good, but at the same time, there's not a whole lot of time left. Again, hopefully there will be a something that I can do to, um, we'll say, clear up some of these ideas in my own head by reading some of the material that they put out there, because I know there are plenty of books on these topics. But again, I wanted to share these with you. So I'm going to, again, as I said, with these videos, I want to talk for maybe 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, and then start reading some comments and see if we can pull out some more questions. Any questions that you want to talk about? You want to talk about your favorite run of comics, anything like that? Any questions for me for my campaigns, for the way I make comics, anything like that? We just want to share, and I want to make this a fun time, because again, this is why I'm talking about geeking out about comics. I wanted to do a video tonight where I had fun, because well, a lot of people do tell me that my normal Saturday videos are a bit dour, but the fact is, this is what I want to do, and I want to have fun doing it, and I want to share how much fun I have doing it as well with you. So let's take a look at the comments here. I'll just have to scroll up to the top and then down a little bit. Everybody's saying hi at the beginning. Again, I always got to say hi to Sound Engraver. You go on over to Sound Engraver's channel if you want to learn about stuff that I talk about in a more musical format. So scrolling down a little bit, let's see. Scrolling down, random says he made it. He made it. Great. I'm glad to see a lot of people here. 20 people watching. That's great. Let's see. Somebody. Let's see. Calliope is telling me that YouTube is not notifying people when I'm going live. Well, I'll try to, as best I can, give you some more ability to see that I'm going to go live either by tweeting it out or by opening up a live stream and scheduling it for later earlier. But the thing is that with my connection, it's a little bit of a problem doing that because I don't know. My connection is really dependent upon the weather. Since I'm using satellite internet, yes, weather does affect what I can do and when I can stream and all that kind of thing. So I can't really say I'm going to start a stream in 2 hours because 2 hours from now it might be raining and I might not be able to stream. So unfortunately, that's one of my problems. Let's see. Let's see. A couple of comments here. I'll just highlight them. Random says you're getting more sales than modern comics. Ah, let's hope. Anyways, I'm getting more sales than I would say your standard 70-page graphic novel for Marvel and DC. But who knows with the way that the comic sales are going right now? I don't have hard numbers to actually confirm that. So scrolling down, let's see. Calliope saying that I got the comic and the map. They're good. I really love maps. I just have to say, I always, when people talk about the map, I love maps. And I wanted this fantasy comic book graphic novel to have a map. Let's see. Let's see. Miss Maria talking about Aristotle. So scrolling down, John says, Hail. Hail the chat. John Douglas. Let's see. Let's see. Miss Maria says her favorite comic is Squadron Supreme. Now, my question about that, Maria, is what Squadron Supreme would that be? Because I'm only used to the 80s version of the Squadron Supreme, which, if I can recall correctly, is a 12-issue miniseries. That's the only one that I can think of off the top of my head. And it evolved out of the Thor book, if I do remember correctly, because they live on parallel Earth, which basically revolves around the sun in the exact opposite way that we do on Earth 1 or Earth Prime or whatever they call it in Marvel. And basically, we can't see each other because one's always hidden behind the sun. But that's the only Squadron Supreme that I'm aware of. There might have been a 90s version or a 2000s version that I'm not aware of. But again, Squadron Supreme in its original was supposed to be a Marvel version of DC Heroes because you had what's his name, the hydrogen guy, he was supposed to be Superman, and then you had Prism and he was supposed to be Green Lantern, and then you had, I don't know if the Wiz or something like that was in there. There was a takeoff of Flash and things like that. So that was their way of introducing DC characters into the Marvel universe without getting sued. Let's see. Calliope says the New Mutants, especially the Demon Bear saga. Funny enough, I have Mike Gustovich working on both CROM the Destroyer. Actually, you know what? Now, come to think about it, Mike is the only person that has actually worked on all three of my books so far. So Mike Gustovich was an old Marvel and DC employee. He worked for them in the 80s. He worked on pretty much every comic character that you can think of from the 80s. Everything from Batman to Avengers to Conan, and he did standalone characters, everything like that. He did mainly inking, but he also did some penciling for Batman. Anyways, so he did the inking for the last pages, the epilogue of Thomas Valiant, #1. He's handling the pencils for the Rampaging Thor, which is 1/3 of the Valiant Heroes, and he's doing the inking for CROM the Destroyer. So yeah, he did the run of the New Mutants right before the Demon Bear saga, but he was the inker only at that time. So he worked on, I think, New Mutants right from #1 up until, I'm not sure what the last issue he worked on, but he certainly did #1, 2, 3, and I think it might have went quite a bit higher than that until you got to Demon Bear. But anyways, yes, my brother actually was the one who bought New Mutants from #1, so I got the advantage of actually reading those books as they came off the spinner rack, and great art and great stories. I continued on with New Mutants almost the entire run until it turned into X-Force. So yeah, and again, um, that was Bill Sienkiewicz did the Demon Bear, if I remember correctly, and that's another very interesting way to deal with art that broke out of the mold of the 70s, but at the same time had a very 80s feel to it, didn't quite go into the extravagance of the 90s. So right there's another example of what I'm talking about. So let's see. Um Random says, not familiar with this comic, Random. Let's see. Flex Mentalo. I don't even have a clue who actually made that comic or where it's from. So unfortunately, I can't comment on that one. Let's see. Let's see. A couple other comments about favorite comics. I will always have a weakness for Archie's Sonic and Hedgehog. A lot of people tell me that. I get that comment a lot in my comment section. People really loved the Sonic the Hedgehog, especially when I did the video about the fella. I can't remember. He's working on Ghostlight, which is basically a mini series for Silver Surfer right now, and he was talking to this presenter at Marvel, and they were talking about Sonic the Hedgehog and how basically there was a woman writer of color and how this just represented them and they felt so included. And then I got people in the comments going, no, that never happened. I have no recollection of this person ever writing Sonic the Hedgehog. And I was surprised that people were actually able to pull that out of their mind that quick because they loved that Sonic the Hedgehog run in comics. It's not something I followed, but I know it does have a very sound following. Let's see. Let's see. Sound Engraver has a comment here. She says, comics were never my medium. That said, I plan to read Batman The Long Halloween this fall with Tim Sale. The Long Halloween. I do think that, let me see, I'm trying to pull that up in my mind if The Long Halloween was part of the Legends of the Dark Knight or not. There was a Long Halloween that was connected to the Legends of the Dark Knight from the late 80s, I think. But it could be something completely different because you're saying it's Tim Sale, so that's different art, if I can recall. There was it's funny because there was a advertisement for basically something like the Long Halloween in the 80s where it had a pumpkin because it was Halloween and it had a mouth on it that looked like a bat. And I always to this day, when I carve a pumpkin, that's what I do. But yeah, I'm getting more into the Tim Sale stuff right now, partly because I'm trying to dust off my penciling skills, and I want to do some art for my characters themselves, especially Phantasm. And I thought Tim Sale way of actually doing very simplistic art would ease me back into actually drawing again, and that would be the perfect medium for characters like Phantasm. So yeah, I'm dusting those skills off. I don't know if I have the time to actually do it with all that's coming up with putting out 2 comics a year though. So perhaps I'm misremembering when the Long Halloween actually was. Let's see, scrolling down. Uh, see if I missed anybody in their comments. Oh, Atari Force. Let's see. Atari Force and Johnny Thunder 1985 comic book run. I don't remember Johnny Thunder. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I do. Johnny Thunder was, oh, he was originally in, I think it was All Star Squadron. You're talking about the DC character that has a basically a purple lightning bolt, which does his entire bidding, which basically a genie. I didn't get into much of that. At the same time, I do remember Atari Force. Never the comic that I would go to first to pick up, but I do own some Atari Force. Again, some great 80s comics that I might want to pick up and actually learn something from. All right, let's see. Comment here from Zach Dan. Maybe I'm just biased, but 90s seemed to be the peak animation, a good combination of at least some traditional values and pretty decent technology. So for animation, I don't think there was very much for animation in the 80s. Quite honestly, you got the late 70s. I don't know if the Spider-Man stuff would be early 80s or not. I can't even remember. There wasn't very much. I'll tell you right now, for animation for comic book characters, being someone who I lived through the 80s. I don't remember a whole lot. So you're probably right if you're just talking about animation. Because yeah, with the Dark Knight and all that kind of stuff, head and shoulders above anything you get in the 80s for animation for comic book characters. Let's see. Let's see. Miss Maria is very happy that I can't do one video without mentioning Aristotle. That's nice to see. At least I'm making somebody laugh. Let's see. Scrolling down a little bit. Yeah, see, here's the thing about so Michael says, I like the sound effects in the Adam West Batman TV show. Those are old style sound effects. And when I say old style, I mean DC sound effects that continued on into DC long before they should have probably faded out. I don't think Marvel ever actually went that hard with the sound effects as that show did. But again, it shows you very much what I was talking about, the fact that if there's a need for a sound effect, that's when the sound effect comes in. Otherwise, you're just cluttering up the page. And with the old Batman Adam West TV show, there was a need for those sound effects to basically camouflage the fact that they weren't getting punched in the mouth every 5 seconds. So again, there is a need for sound effects, put a sound effect in. If there's no need, if your story is told by the art itself or by what is being told by the author, then it seems a bit superfluous and in the way, especially in the way of the art. Unless, of course, you're the artist themselves and you do stuff like Walter Simonson and want to make it part of the background art. I can't do that because I'm not the artist. But yeah, again, a great example of using sound effects as, I would say, an addition to the storytelling, which is what it's supposed to be. All right, my feed just jumped. So just give me 1 second here. I got to take a scroll down again with the taking a look at the comments and see if there's, oh, here we are. All right, so again, I'm just going through the comments and seeing what everybody's saying. Random says, I think onomatopoeia are an incredibly underrated part of comics. It's not only accentuates the action, but it adds some character to the comic itself. Agreed. And again, I really love the Walter Simonson way of combining onomatopoeia with a literal word in order to make a sound effect, because it does take your brain in two directions at one time with basically one word, which is looked at as the background. All right. So because Walter Simonson, again, can put it in the background since he's the artist. Let's see, scrolling down, see if I got anything. Scrolling down just a little more, see if I got any more comments about your favorite comic runs or any question that you have. Yeah. I just have to highlight this. Zach Dan says, conflict in comic books. Who would have imagined? Yeah. Again, I was just talking to, I'm not really talking to, but I guess Call Me Shadow posted something on Twitter this morning, and he gives the Entertainment Weekly cover page for the new Marvels, which is, Captain Marvel, Brie Larson, and Miss Marvel, whatever the Kamala Khan one is. And I don't even know what the old Captain Marvel's name is, Photon or something like that. But anyways, what they have as a cover for this magazine, and I commented this on his post, was the fact that you got three women standing statically, just upright, doing nothing. And that was supposed to sell somehow this superhero action movie. That doesn't work. My comment was, what is the action in this piece? Their attitude? Because there's nothing else. Now I know that there's some. It's part of a trailer, which is basically like 10 seconds long, which does show some gleaming fists, and that's about it, or gleaming eyes. But still, even with that, that's not anything that's going to draw in an action audience for a superhero movie. It's just not. And even I can understand. You might say it's just their first try. It's just their first out there. This is Marvel, owned by Disney. They can come up with something better than that. Something better than that. Because I'm looking here at these old comic covers. And again, 3 points, always. The really good ones. You're not going to get it on every cover. And I would say when you don't get those 3 points of danger on your cover, it's a bad illustration. There's very, very few covers that actually don't incorporate that which are extremely memorable. And again, this is what you get with so many covers within what you have with Marvel and DC, and even some of the independent comics right now. Again, I talked to Graham Nolan about this. He called them evergreen covers. They're evergreen covers because you can slap this cover on any comic at any time for almost any character. So it has nothing to do with the story itself, and it has no action because of that. There's very, very little action in it. There's poses. People are posing. They may look intimidating or something of the kind, but that's it. Since it doesn't have anything to do with the story, you can't do this exact thing which I'm talking about with this 3 points of danger, because although this is an illustration that is meant to draw in the reader so that they actually want to read the sequentials inside the comic, it has a tie to those sequentials in order to do that. An evergreen cover does not do that in any way. It just is a pretty picture, and you get these. I'm sorry, but if you're one of these people, I apologize to you in advance, but you get one of these people, these morons, who buy a comic simply for the cover. What good is that? Just go buy the piece of art. Go find it somewhere, make a poster of it, get a printer and print it off yourself. Why do you have to buy the entire comic for that? You're just killing the comic industry by buying a comic for a cover. And especially if it has nothing to do with the comic itself, it's just killing comics. With this kind of art that I'm talking about, with the 3 points of danger, you have 3 points because you know what the story is on the inside, and you can pick out 3 points of danger from the sequentials within the comic itself to actually connect the audience from their initial illustration grab of that comic from the cover to the sequentials on the inside, and they can feel fulfilled about actually reading something that they weren't bait and switched into buying. I'm sorry, I ranted on that, but yeah, um, conflict in a comic. That's what we need. That's why almost every one of my comics, it starts with the Stan Lee and John Romita Senior way when they talked about making comics the Marvel way. It's begin with a splash page, something that's going to draw in your audience. Action is probably the best thing that's going to do that. Yeah, I guess I should stop ranting right now because we'll get on to some more of these comments. Let's see. Here's a Conan comment that I was going to actually get into myself. Everybody have fun tonight, says John Buscema or Buscemi, however you say it. Roy Thomas Conan is one of the great runs of all time, so the bar is pretty high for CROM. Yes, again, this is what I'm going back to. I'm going back to the great 80s comics, some great 70s comics, because I would say Roy Thomas and John Buscema worked better in the 70s together than in the 80s. I don't know if they got all the way through the 80s, both of them together, or very far into it, actually. But yeah, I try to, again, I'm a very good mimic. I'm someone who looks at what is in front of me and say, I can reproduce that. And then hopefully after reproducing that enough times, I can start to add my own way of thinking about this and what is, I would say, hopefully better storytelling if that's at all possible. So this is what I tried to do with CROM the Destroyer. It is very much in a layout fashion. Again, I don't follow the strict layout fashion that I talked about within one of my videos a couple of months ago, which is basically a 6-panel structure for most Conan comics and most Conan pages. But Roy Thomas is actually putting in a lot of dialogue within older Conan comics. I don't have that much dialogue in my comics at all because I just don't think current audience, I won't say modern audience, that's a bad word right now, but a current audience I don't think would actually stand for the amount of dialogue that Roy Thomas would put into a comic today. I really don't think they would. So when you look at CROM the Destroyer and the first 11 pages that are posted on the website or on the Indiegogo site for it, before you order, you can read all 11 pages. And the book is 66 pages. Again, the link is in the description for CROM the Destroyer, my return to form for low fantasy. But yeah, I try to cut down on the amount of panels, the strict panel regiment that John Buscema pulled out of what was essentially only Conan. I tried to play with that a little bit while at the same time giving homage to it. I also am trying to, well, I listened to Roy Thomas talk about making Conan and how it felt different than most other Marvel comics. One of the things being that they don't use sound effects at all. I do, well, you'll see that they do. You use sound effects insofar as if someone is screaming or something like that, it would take the place of a word balloon. But typically there's no bam, pap, wow kind of sound effects within there, and they purposely did that in order to distinguish it from the rest of Marvel Comics. Again, I tried to do that myself by giving you art and story that is going to explain what is going on to your eye faster than if I put in these things that are distracting in the background for fantasy, which is basically superhero types of sound effects. So anyway, yes, setting the bar high. I That's what you got to do. Everybody, you got to set the bar high. And I might miss the bar, but at the very least, I tried for it. These people writing comics and drawing comics and producing comics right now, especially for the mainstream, they don't even try. They don't even try for great. I am reaching for great. And I may not get it every time. I'm probably not, knowing that I'm human. But at the very least, I'm going to try for it. And yeah, even the lettering. I went back and read old Roy Thomas, John Buscema versions of Conan, as many as I could. I got a whole bunch of them for Christmas because someone was filling in my holes within my Marvel's Conan. And just poured over the pages. I have to first read the book and then go over the pages again in order to see these things that I want to see, how the panels are laid out, what kind of panels work with which kind of action, what the colorist is using for the background. There's something else within, within Conan comics that I noticed, something else to go with today. Another one of those things which I try to incorporate in CROM the Destroyer. If you look at the John Buscema Roy Thomas run of Conan, you will see, and not only Conan, but also Thanagar, which I don't think Roy Thomas wrote, but it's the same basic vibe. You'll get to see that there is usually a minimum of one panel and some, well, I would say usually at least one panel on each page with a red background. Now, why? Well, usually there's only one. I guess I shouldn't say minimum. Usually there's only one per page because it's supposed to draw your eye to a bit of action that's, again, not typical, but they're not using sound effects in order to draw it out. So they're using the coloring. This is what I find. Again, this is just me reading the books, but this is what I find when you're reading those old Conan comics. I try to pull that out of these comics and do that kind of thing within the stressors that they use instead of sound effects, which again would be coloring and the way that it's lettered, because you'll notice that the lettering has emphasis on words that normally you wouldn't get within some comics in the lettering. And that emphasis on words is a stress to the way that the cadence of the speech of the characters goes. So a lot of things to pull out of those great Conan comics. Again, that's what I'm trying to do. Let's see. Everybody says the cover is more than just an illustration. It must tell a story too to get us to buy it. Exactly. That's exactly what I was saying. These evergreen covers, again, this is Graham Nolan. His word for it is evergreen covers. I don't know if that's the official way that you call them, but if they don't have anything to do with the internals, and it's not selling books. Let's see. Scrolling down. Sound Engraver just has a comment saying, I appreciate your talk on science fiction. People are attracted to futuristic aesthetics, but it's more than writing a romance in space. I plan to contribute to real science. I plan to contribute to real science in the future. Well, it's great to hear. And again, I base that video a lot off of my conversation with John C. Wright, who is a hard science fiction writer. He was part of the Sad Puppies movement. The people who were basically saying to the awards, I don't know what they would call them, the people who give out the awards for science fiction and fantasy, that, hey, you're doing this according to political correctness now, not according to merit. But again, I talked to him not only on the interview that I posted on my channel this last winter. This is probably about 6 months ago now. but also we had a nice little chat besides that, that we didn't record. And yeah, he gave me some great insights into a lot of the stuff that has been going on for the last 10 years in science fiction, since he is a prominent science fiction writer. He was actually, I think, in the early 1990s, mid 1990s, called, what was the title that they gave him? The the best up and comer in science fiction writing. But anyways, and he is friends with Brian Niemeyer, and I've worked with Brian Niemeyer just a little bit. Again, a great science fiction writer, and he helped me edit some of the. Just one second here. Some of the manuscript for my novel. Sorry about that. Just swatting a fly. But yeah, so that's what I was drawing on when I was talking about those kinds of things. All right, so da, 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 da. John says, "What is the proper spelling of Sana Amina?" I don't know. Just go Google it. You'll be able to find out. Um, just put Sana Amanat in Marvel Comics or something. It'll probably come up. I can't even remember what her Twitter handle is. I haven't gone to her Twitter in so long. But anyway, I don't. You're asking the wrong person to spell. Let me put it that way. I use Grammarly and editors for a reason. I was taught to spell phonetically, unfortunately. But anyways, let's see. Scrolling down a little bit. Uh, Here's a good comment from Tony. Were you a fan of the Transformer comics? Not particularly, although I did buy them, because this was one of the things with the Transformers comics that I didn't like. Um, they had some spectacular art on the cover, but I didn't find that the art on the inside was ever anywhere near a match for the art on the cover, nor did it actually tie in the cover art with the story a lot of times. I found it was a bit of a bait and switch. I think the best, I mean, there's some beautiful Bill Sienkiewicz um, art for the 80s Transformers. And I'm just talking about Marvel's Transformers. Those are the only Transformer comics that I know of and that I actually own some of. At the same time, I was probably more enthralled with Marvel's G.I. Joe than I was with Transformers, and I would pick one over the other. I was a little bit too old to get into the Transformer craze when it actually hit. There were kids that were, annoying kids at school that were a couple of years below me that were into the Transformer thing, although you couldn't escape it in the toy store or on the television. But at the same time, it wasn't exactly my thing. But I found that G.I. Joe was, even though it was in the same time frame, it was much more of a, it was about soldiers. So, you could get by being an older kid and reading about soldiers. But anyways, so yeah, there was I don't say a stigma about it, because again, the only Transformer comics that I know anything about would be the 80s Marvel Transformer comics. But a little bit of a stigma back in the 80s that if you were older, you didn't read Transformer comics because you're too old for that. I'm not sure a lot of people would get that today about how much of a difference. I don't even know if this is still a thing, but there used to be a big difference between people who were just 1, 2 years older, younger than you. You didn't do things that the people 2 years older or 2 years younger than you did, even 1 year. I remember this strict hierarchy within school. You didn't associate with people in other grades. You just didn't. Maybe this was just where I was from, but I think it was more of an 80s thing. But anyway, let's see. Scrolling down here, some other comments. Charlie says, "Thank you for helping to inspire me to make what is going to be a novel into a comic. Have you ever read the old 90s Turok comic? I just read the first one and it reminds me of how cool the games are." Actually, yes. Turok is one of the books that I was desperate to get a hold of when Valiant Comics actually put it out, because I had old Gold Key Turok comics. Not that I bought those. I think they probably trickled down from one of my uncles or something like that. But yeah, Turok, the old Gold Key Turok comics, I read growing up, and then when Valiant came out with the Turok comics, there was one of the titles from Valiant. Like, I bought all the Valiant books when they first came out, every last one of them. Solar Man of the Atom, Magnus Robot Fighter, Rai, Ninjak, everything, Harbinger, all the comics that came out of Valiant Comics. I bought them all. And I'm sorry to say that I was supremely disappointed by almost every last one of them. I love how much Jim Shooter did for Marvel Comics and for DC Comics before that. But when he got a hold of Valiant and those heroes, he really dropped the ball, especially with Magnus and Solar. Those characters could have gone in such a great direction. And quite honestly, I picked up my copies of Magnus, a robot fighter, and I start reading them again probably about 3, 4 years ago because I was going to do a comic section on them when I used to do comic sections, and you could see the precursors of the kind of thing you see today, because it was more about the fact that these robots were people and they had their own genders and all these kinds of things. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I can see why I didn't like these comics to begin with, but where I'm going with this is that Turok was the one of the exceptions. The other would be Rye, and again, that wasn't completely the case, but again, Rye did ride the wave of the Valiant beginning, and so I carried on with it as long as I could. But Turok was, I would say, probably the best comic to come out of all of those runs. So yeah, it did. I remember playing the Turok first person shooter basically when that game came out because I was so happy that this obscure character that I grew up reading from Gold Key Comics actually started to get into the mainstream. So let's see. Sound Engraver says, good luck with my penciling. Yeah, I'm gonna try. Thank you very much. Luck is well, first of all, I don't really believe in luck, but at the same time, thank you. uh, let's see. Charlie says, it's like if Rambo was a time traveling Native American who fights cyborg dinosaurs with super brains that were spawned from an evil goddess. Yes, Turok. And you should write blurbs, Charlie, for you'd be good at that. That's a really good description of Turok. Let's see, scrolling down. Uh, that's apologies. Again, I have to scroll back up because I got to jump in my screen, but I'm going to get to the last of these comments before the hour is up. Random says, Flex Mentallo was a miniseries written by Grant Morrison. The title character is basically a knockoff of the Atlas Man, and the series is a critique of the comics of each era. Okay. I've never heard of it. I'm not a very big Grant Morrison fan though. So, um, I think it was, who did I talk to? What's his name? Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head. I was talking to someone about the British invasion and how I think it was probably for the worse for North American comics. But anyways, I think Grant Morrison was part of that, was he not? I think. I'm not entirely sure. Let's see. Scrolling down. Johnny Thunder in 1985 was a woman and a Dick Tracy type detective. No, I don't remember that at all. Who's the character I'm thinking of? No, I don't remember that book at all. I remember Detective Agency. That was an innovation comic for a while, and it kept on switching, um, kept on switching companies, and had these beautiful Alan Davis covers all the time. I don't know how the guy actually was connected to Alan Davis to get all those covers. That's the only female detective one that I can remember actually buying. So I don't remember Johnny Thunder. Let's see. Scrolling down. Random says, I need to go to bed. Yeah, you go right ahead. I know it's late wherever you are. I try to, let's see, I try to make, well, the reason why I have these um, streams in what is basically the middle of the night is because, again, that's when less people are using the bandwidth that I use for my satellite internet. So I got much less of a chance actually getting kicked off. So that's why this happens. But anyway, scrolling down, let's see. Scrolling down. I never really read, Tony asked, did I ever read Heavy Metal magazine? Not really. It wasn't something that I would typically read. Um, and I don't even think, even for my comic shop, I don't remember it being on the well, we didn't have spinner racks at my comic shop. It was just a wall. Basically, it was an entire wall though, of new comic books every week. But no, I never really read Heavy Metal magazine. I've watched some of the movies, but that's about it. Let's see. Let's see. No, Sound Engraver is being very facetious here. Attitude is action, says woman. No, it ain't. Let's see. We'll scroll down to the last couple of comments. I'm going to try to get through as many as I can here. I don't want to go too far over the hour because I like to keep these at an hour. Zektan says, if a cover did have action but didn't actually have anything to do with the comic, I would feel cheated. Yeah. Again, these are one of the things that, well, not one of the things, some of the things I'm trying to do with making my comics. And what I do and what I don't do is because there's a lot of comics in the 1980s and 1990s that just ticked me off because I would grab them and buy them. And all of a sudden, I would get this beautiful cover and then open it up because I would be usually buying every time I went into the comic shop like 30, 40, 50 comics because they were less than $1. Yeah, and I basically used all the money that I could ever make to buy comics. But I would get them home and I would open them up and you get the awful art on the inside. And I think to myself, I would never have bought this if I had opened it up. And it really set me off to give me some pet peeves on comics. And I try to keep away from those. That's why I don't have multiple covers for any of my books. I think that's a cheat. That's why I try to keep the art on the cover, if not by the same person who is doing the internals, but at the very least, by someone who is the same quality artist, all these kinds of things. So I quite agree. And I try to give you action, even though a cover doesn't give you the action exactly as it happens on the inside. It does give you a version of that action, which is the way you would see an old Marvel cover. All right, scrolling down a little more. Let's see. Michael, I have never heard of this comic. It's my favorite comic book villain. He is Glass. He controls Glass, which is useful inside the homeland of North Korea, but is overpowered everywhere else. I forgot that comic. Let's see. I've never heard of this comic before. Colonel Glass. I've literally never heard of it. I wonder who published that. But anyways, I probably won't get into that because I have to scroll down through these other comments before it gets too late. Rex says, out of curiosity, have you ever read anything by Edgar Rice Burroughs, Tarzan, John Carter of Mars, Carson of Venus? Again, everybody tells me that the John Carter of Mars that I read in Marvel Comics has very little to do with John Carter of Mars. I have read some of Tarzan, some of John Carter of Mars. Again, familiar with both of those characters, plus Carson of Venus through comics. I do have, I think, not the full collected works of Tarzan, but the essential collected works of Tarzan and of John Carter, which I have not gotten to read yet, but they're on my reading list. So, yeah, I would probably only know them through the Marvel comics that were published of each of them. Although I don't think Carson of Venus was Marvel. I'm not entirely sure. I am familiar with the characters through those venues, though. Vaz says, I just started reading the reprints of Savage Sword of Conan. Really surprised how different it was compared to comics published nowadays. Completely different storytelling style and incredible art. Agreed. It is basically why I wanted to, one of the reasons why I wanted to do the artist version of CROM the Destroyer. I give it to you in a graphic novel version, which is colored, and a magazine version, which is the same size as Savage Sword of Conan, and it's just black and white. It has an extremely different feel to it. And yes, the art is handled very differently. As I said, when you look into, if you're talking about Marvel Conan, part of the fact is that, again, as I said, Roy Thomas and the rest of the producers of Conan used very specifically the coloring, as far as I'm concerned, in order to tell the story in a different way. And when that was lacking within the Savage Sword of Conan, because it was only black and white, they had to find a new style. And they did experiment with a lot of different artists as well, beautiful artists, and not just John Buscema. Let's see now. and it contains one of, I think it's, I can't even remember what number it is. It's like number 4 or 12. Contains my favorite Conan story, which is I call it Conan and the Cross, but I can't remember what is exactly called. Something like that. He's basically on an X cross on the cover. All right, so let's see. Scrolling down. Nope, I talked about that one. Talked about this one. Let's see. Let's see. Scrolling down. Uh, Manny asked the question, how many panels should a comic page have? Depends on who the artist is, depends on how much they can put into it. Again, from my estimation is that there is much more of a play in North American comics, but the typical, we'll say, the typical range that you're going to get is somewhere between 6 and 9. And now you can go all the way down to 1 with a splash page. You can go all the way up to 12. I've seen some Batman comics done by Jim Aparo where you got like 15 panels. There's some Steranko comics that have like 25 panels on a page just because he's putting in these tiny, tiny little bits of things. But yeah, the average would be for normal, if you're going back to 80s comics, 70s comics, especially. I won't go into the 90s because they use, again, so many splash pages and all these kinds of things, weird ways of actually drawing a page. It would be between 6 and 9. That would be the standard as far as I'm concerned. And that would give your artist, what I try to do when I make a page, because I write full scripts for the comics, is the fact that if I have a dialogue heavy page, I gravitate more towards 6 panels. If I have a page that is, and sometimes less, if there is, I'm not going to do the Marvel thing where it's giant blocks of text over one splash page that got nothing on it. But no, I'm not doing that. I try to keep at very least 5 to 6 panels per page. That's usually when I have a lot of text in order to put word balloons in. If I have something that has very little to no dialogue within the page, I stretch that for somewhere between 9 to 12. And 12 is the absolute maximum that I will go at. And that only maybe once a book, maybe not even that. So that's my standard. And that's what I think I pulled out of the way that comics were made within the 70s and the 80s. Anyways. All right. So scrolling down, I think I'm finally getting to the bottom of this chat. Let's see. Scrolling down, and my feed just jumped again. Let's see. Sound Engraver says, that's cool that you know Brian Nehemiah. Not surprised though. Well, I don't technically know him. He probably wouldn't. I've worked with him. We'll put it that way. We're not friends or anything like that. He basically took my manuscript and I said, can you edit this for me? And he said, yep, can do. And, gave me back the finished copy with all of his edits that he thought would be necessary along with an invoice. So, so I have worked with him. So let's see, scrolling down. Try to get to the bottom of these comments. Charlie says, Turok Comics is awesome. Yes, and played Turok as a kid. I think I played Turok in university. So yeah. All right, scrolling down. Let's see. Yes. Let's see. Who says this? Calliope says, so Turok, like Son of Thunder. Yes. I don't even know how to pronounce that. So it's Iraq, Son of Thunder. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that the Gold Key Turok were like. Let's see. Scrolling down. See if I got any more comments. Scrolling down, see if I can pull out a few things here. Any more talk about comics or people just talking to each other? Talking about Turok and Iraq, Son of Thunder. ARK. Let's see. Have I ever read the Jungle Book? I do own the Jungle Book. I don't remember reading it, but it's among my books, so I possibly could have at one point. So there's that. I want to go through a lot of my older books and read them over again. I just buy things, by the way, and hopefully I'll have some time to read them. Other people are going to have to deal with them when I die. So anyways, scrolling down, which will not be for a long time. I'm looking up towards heaven. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Charlie says, sorry, I'm spamming the comments, but have you thought about doing an interview with Razorfist? I'm stoked at his Western comic, and I think you guys could have a great chat. Godspeed. I contacted Razorfist through his email, which he has somewhere connected, and I never got a response. So I know that he's pretty busy with a lot of things, but I would do an interview with him. He was one of the people on my list to do an interview with that I wanted to do an interview with, but yeah, I never got any. I went through the official channels, let's say, and I never got any reply. So again, I can understand sometimes people are busy. Same with well, people talking about people busy. I contacted who was it? Oh, good heavens, can't think of his name off the top of my head. Oh, the Critical Drinker, right? I contacted the Critical Drinker, said, you want to come on so I could interview you? He said, sorry, I'm just too busy with my own stuff. So I did get a polite reply from the Critical Drinker. But yeah, a lot of people are a little too busy to talk to me since I only got 20,000 subscribers. Let's see. Oh, people talking about Turok again. So I'll just leave that be. Let's see. Keep making great art. Oh, thank you very much for the super chat, Sound Engraver. Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, shout out to Sound Engraver. If you want to listen to the things that I normally talk about, but in a music setting, go over to Sound Engraver's channel. All right, so let's see. So scrolling down, I think I got to the end of the comments. Been talking for an hour and 11 minutes. So I'm going to have to take off. I want to thank everybody for coming, and hopefully you had some fun and maybe learn something about making comics, or at the very least the way I make comics. And hopefully we can share those kinds of ideas and make comics great again. I'm going to leave you with the second trailer for CROM the Destroyer. We're doing great on the Indiegogo campaign. We've hit over 11,000, I do believe, and over, well, about 175 backers, which is pretty good for an opening 2 weeks. So if you want to order CROM the Destroyer, the link is in the description, and so is the link for the Valiant Heroes, where you can also order Thomas Valiant if you order either CROM the Destroyer or the Valiant Heroes. So all of my graphic novels, links for them are in the description. Go on over to CROM the Destroyer and check it out. You can read those first 11 pages on the Indiegogo page and get to see what the story is like in the beautiful art. All right, so here's the outro with my CROM the Destroyer trailer number 2. Thank you everyone that has shown up. I got 31 people in the chat now. Thank you very much. I'm hoping to make this a weekly thing so that we can draw in more and more people, and we can talk about comics and we can have some fun. All right, here's CROM the Destroyer. Bye.
No matter how many wars you fight, no matter how much blood you shed, no matter how much rage you loose, no matter how many demons you face, no matter how many companions you lose, no matter if our kingdom falls, I know that you will return to me in honor.